Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're looking at a paper called Rethinking Democracy, a Socratic critique and the Progressive Utilization Theory alternative.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty dense read, I got to admit, but
Mm-hmm.
the main takeaway for me is this. Like, we always talk about how important democracy is, right? But this paper says just having democracy like a system, that isn't enough. It argues we need, like, educated, ethical people to actually make democracy, work well. It is interesting. And what really got me was how they connect the ideas of, well, everyone knows Socrates, right? Ancient Greek philosopher, with something called progressive utilization theory, which I'll admit I had to look up. It's like a modern framework for how to build a just society. So we've got like ancient wisdom meets futuristic thinking all in one paper. Should be fun.
Yeah, it's a fascinating combo. And the paper kind of starts by taking us way back, like 5th century BCE Athens, where democracy first popped up. They had, direct citizen participation, voting, all that stuff. Pretty revolutionary for the time.
Yeah, like if Schoolhouse Rock was set in Greece or something, huh?
Exactly. But what's interesting is, even back then, not everyone was on board with democracy. And this is where Socrates comes in. He was already, even in that like early democracy, pointing out some serious problems with how it was working.
Yeah, because Socrates was no dummy. He wasn't just some guy complaining. He was like the OG philosopher, deep thinker. So what was he worried about? Like, what did he see going wrong? And did he have any ideas for fixing it?
Well, his big concern was basically that people weren't equipped to make good decisions, when it came to voting. And he has this analogy he uses, which is people still use it today. It's so good. Imagine you're on a ship, right? Would you let just anyone grab the wheel and steer?
No way. You'd want someone who, like, knows what they're doing, an experienced captain.
Right. That's exactly his point. Socrates thought voting, it should be treated like any other skill, something you, I don't know, learn, practice, not just this automatic right you have because you're a citizen.
Huh. That's kind of tripping to think about. Like, what would make someone a good voter? I mean,
Yeah.
would we need, like, voter's ed the way we have driver's ed?
That's a cool idea to think about. Socrates, he was big on critical thinking, logic, being able to see through, fancy rhetoric and all that. He was also really worried about demagogues, which they were basically these charismatic leaders, who could really manipulate people, even if their ideas were bad for everyone. Like, there's this Athenian general, Alcibiades, super charming guy, but also reckless, and he convinced everyone to go to war with Sicily. Total disaster, really weakened Athens in the end, so bad decision.
Yikes. So Socrates is saying democracy needs like a brain to go with its heart, right? Like passion is great, but you also got to have informed, ethical people making the choices or it all goes sideways.
Exactly. Sadly, though, Socrates kind of paid the price for all that critical thinking of his. He ended up, well, he was put on trial and executed for corrupting the youth, which basically meant making people think too much. It's kind of messed up. Even in a democracy, the majority can be wrong, and sometimes it's dangerous to be the one pointing that out.
Whoa. Yeah, that's a chilling reminder that, even when you have democracy as a system, freedom of thought, the right to question things, it's fragile, man. And it makes Socrates seem even more relevant today, like with all the fake news echo chambers online. It's like, we really need to get better at critical thinking if we want to make democracy work.
Totally agree. It's like a wake-up call, We got to sharpen our minds, be careful who we're listening to, all that. Can't just be passive and let whatever info comes at us, like, take over our brains, right? We got to be active, engaged citizens.
Okay, so we've established Socrates, he has some issues with how Athenian democracy was playing out, right? But the paper, it doesn't stop there. It goes on to look at this whole progressive utilization theory thing. Like, is that the solution? What's the big idea there?
Well, progressive utilization theory is all about creating a society that's just, fair, but also sustainable, a place where everyone can actually thrive, and not just, materially, but also spiritually and intellectually. It's kind of like a holistic view of well-being, you could say, where individual and collective progress, they go hand in hand.
Sounds like it's taking the idea of democracy and not just applying it to politics, but like to the economy, how society is structured, everything.
Exactly, like taking all the good stuff about democracy and kind of weaving it into how we organize ourselves from top to bottom, like from our economy to our education system even. So with progressive utilization theory, they have these 5 core principles, and they're kind of like a guide for creating a society where, like we were saying, everyone can thrive.
5 principles. Okay, lay them on me. What are the pillars of this whole progressive utilization theory thing?
Okay, so the first one, it's all about resources, right? Like the idea is that no one person should control more than they actually need. It's about preventing that super concentration of wealth and making sure everybody's got at least the basics covered.
Oh, that's a big idea. It's like challenging the whole, greed is good thing that we've kind of been living with for, well, forever. It's suggesting a different way to think about wealth, how it gets shared.
Yeah, for sure. And then the second principle kind of builds on that. It's about guaranteeing everyone's basic needs. So we're talking food, shelter, healthcare, education, the whole 9 yards. It's saying, let's create a safety net so that everyone has at least a foundation for a good life, a dignified life.
So it's not just about giving people opportunities, it's also giving them the resources, the essentials they need to actually make use of those opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. And then the third principle, this one's all about making sure we're using resources wisely, like as a whole society. It's called maximum utilization and rational distribution, which sounds fancy, but really it means don't waste stuff when others are in need.
Makes sense to me. It's like built-in sustainability, right? Responsible consumption, thinking about the collective good.
Exactly. Now, the fourth principle, this one's super interesting. It's called decentralized economic democracy.
Ooh, I like the sound of that already. Tell me more.
So it's kind of about giving more control to local communities over their own economies. Imagine like lots of local cooperatives, community-owned businesses, and decisions about the economy are made by the people it affects, not some far-off boardroom.
It's like taking power away from those huge corporations and putting it back where it belongs, with the people. Is there like a real-world example of this that's working?
Oh, yeah. The Mondragon Corporation in Spain. Have you heard of them? They're this network of worker-owned cooperatives. Huge success story.
Mondragon, yeah.
Yeah.
They're like the poster child for worker empowerment, right?
Totally. And they proved that, economic democracy, it's not just some pie-in-the-sky idea. It can actually work, and it leads to less inequality, more stable jobs. Everyone benefits.
Super inspiring. Okay, so we've got 4 principles down. What's the 5th one? The final piece of the puzzle.
Fifth principle, it's all about being flexible, being adaptable. It's called dynamic progress and continuous adjustment, which basically means, society's always changing, right? We got to have systems that can change with it.
So it's not about setting some rigid rules and then being like, okay, we're done. It's about always learning, always improving, making the system work better over time.
Right. And what's really cool is how much progressive utilization theory kind of echoes some of those things Socrates was worried about. Like, they both put a lot of emphasis on education, on having ethical leaders, and making decisions based on reason, not just emotions.
Okay, a thread connecting that ancient wisdom to this modern vision for a better future.
Exactly. But it's not just theoretical. Like, the paper talks about all this research that's been done on education, governance, ethical leadership, all that.
Ooh, data time.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does the research say about the link between education and, democracy actually functioning well?
Well, it's super positive. Like, studies show a strong link between literacy rates, for example, and how stable a democracy is. Countries where more people have, like, high school and college degrees, they tend to have way fewer problems with, democracy breaking down or turning into some kind of dictatorship.
So basically, education helps make democracy stronger, more resilient, less likely to fall apart under pressure.
Exactly. And it's not just about stability either. Like, research also suggests that the more educated a population is, the less corruption they have. Because when people know their rights, they're less likely to put up with shady stuff going on, and they're more likely to, hold their leaders accountable.
It's like Socrates was saying, you got to have informed and ethical citizens if you want good government.
Right. And it's a win-win because when there's less corruption, resources actually get used for what they're supposed to be used for. Public services work better, people trust the government more. It's a whole positive cycle.
It's like this beautiful upward spiral, right? Education leads to better governance, which leads to a society that's more prosperous and fair.
Exactly. And this ties back into progressive utilization theory, with that emphasis on economic democracy and empowering communities. If you've got an educated population that's involved in their local economy, that makes the whole system more resilient and way harder to corrupt.
It's about building a system where people have both the knowledge and the power to shape their own destinies, right?
Right. But there's another piece to this puzzle that the paper talks about, and that's ethical leadership.
Makes sense. Like, even with the best systems in the world, you still need people at the top who are, acting with integrity, who actually care about the common good.
You totally agree. And the research backs this up. Like, societies where people see their leaders as honest and trustworthy, they tend to have less corruption and more social trust overall.
Because, like, Ethical leadership sets the tone, right? It creates a culture of integrity that ripples out through the whole society.
Exactly. Progressive utilization theory even has this whole concept called sadvipra leadership, which is basically about leaders having like spiritual depth and intellectual clarity.
Love that.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just be smart and competent. You got to have a heart. You got to be guided by something bigger than just your own ego or your own desire for power.
Exactly. That's the kind of leadership we need if we want to build a world that's truly just and sustainable, you know?
It's amazing how this conversation has gone from ancient Greece to modern day data, from these kind of heady theories to like real world examples. It shows that these ideas, they're all connected and they matter now more than ever.
It's proof that these questions, these fundamental questions about how we organize ourselves, how we create a fair society, they don't go away no matter how much time passes.
And the good news is, we've got more knowledge now than ever before, more tools, more inspiring examples to learn from.
Totally. We're not starting from scratch. We can build on what's already been done, learn from people all over the world who are doing amazing things, and keep pushing forward, keep innovating.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. It feels like we've been looking at like a roadmap for a better future, a more just and fulfilling world for everyone.
It's about recognizing that a better world is possible and that we all have a role to play in making it happen. It's about taking these insights and figuring out, okay, what can we do with this?
Okay, so we've done a lot of deep diving on rethinking democracy, right?
Eh,
We went from ancient Greece to modern day Spain. We talked philosophy. We looked at research. It's been a ride.
It has.
But now I want to get practical. What do we do with all this knowledge? How do we actually make a difference, create that just and sustainable world that everyone keeps talking about?
That's the big question, right? And luckily, the paper doesn't just leave us hanging with a bunch of theories. It actually points to some concrete steps we can take, both individually and as a society.
Okay, good. Because I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and get to work here. What's step one?
Well, I think it all goes back to education, right?
Yeah.
That's been a recurring theme in our conversation. But it's not just about, any kind of education. It's got to be the right kind, the kind that helps people think critically, make ethical decisions, understand their role as citizens in a democracy.
Yeah, it's like giving people the tools they need to navigate this crazy world,
Mhm.
to see through the BS, make good choices, actually participate in shaping their future.
Exactly. And that might mean, rethinking our whole approach to education, like from the ground up. What if schools focused less on just memorizing facts and more on teaching kids how to think for themselves, how to analyze information, how to solve real world problems?
Man, I wish my school had been like that. Sounds way more interesting than what I went through. But okay, what about stuff outside of school? Like, what can adults do?
Lifelong learning. That's got to be a priority. We got to create more opportunities for people to keep learning, keep growing, even after they finish their formal education. Think about community workshops, online courses, public forums where people can discuss important issues, stuff that matters to them.
It's like making learning a normal part of life, not just something you do for a few years and then you're done, right?
Totally. But along with education, we've got to tackle economic justice. That's huge.
Makes sense. If people are struggling just to survive, pay the bills, put food on the table, they're not going to have much energy left to worry about democracy or creating a better world, right?
Right, exactly. When there's too much inequality, it hurts democracy in so many ways. It creates power imbalances, people get resentful, and it's just harder for everyone to participate fully in civic life.
So how do we fix that? Does progressive utilization theory have any suggestions?
It does. It's all about economic democracy, remember? Giving more power to local communities, like those worker-owned cooperatives we talked about, Mondragon in Spain, that's a great model.
Yeah, Mondragon proves that worker-owned businesses can be successful, like really successful, and they benefit the whole community, not just a few people at the top.
Exactly. So, supporting initiatives like cooperatives, local businesses, community-owned enterprises, that's a big part of it. It's about shifting the balance of power away from those giant corporations and putting it back in the hands of everyday people.
Love it. Power to the people. But what about policy? Are there laws we could change to make things more fair?
Oh, yeah, tons. Like getting money out of politics, that's going to be a top priority. Our systems right now, they're just too skewed in favor of the wealthy and powerful. It's not a level playing field.
I think a lot of people feel that way. It's like, how can we have a real democracy when money has so much influence over elections? and what laws get made.
Exactly. We need to push for campaign finance reform, stricter lobbying rules, just more transparency in general about where the money's coming from and where it's going in politics.
Make it fair for everyone,
Yeah.
right? So it's not just the rich and powerful who get their voices heard.
Right. And we could also think about ways to make politics more participatory, you know? Not just voting every few years and then that's it.
I'm all about more participation, more ways for people to get involved, make their voices heard. What are some ideas for that?
Well, there are these things called citizens' assemblies where you bring together a random group of people, like a jury duty for democracy, and they get to deliberate on policy issues. Or there's participatory budgeting, where communities get to decide how to spend local tax dollars,
Hmm.
stuff that directly affects their lives.
That's cool. More dialogue, more collaboration, more ways for people to be involved in shaping their communities.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget about ethical leadership. That's key.
Yeah, no matter how good our systems are, we still need people in charge who are, honest, who care about the common good, all that stuff.
Totally. We need to hold our leaders to a higher standard, demand transparency, and support those who are actually trying to make the world a better place, not just trying to enrich themselves or grab more power.
It's about changing the culture of leadership,
Right.
making it less about ego and more about serving others.
Exactly. And it's not just about the people at the very top. Every one of us has the potential to be a leader in some way, in our families, our communities, our workplaces.
That's true. We can all make a difference in big ways or small ways. So to everyone listening out there, if you're feeling inspired, if you're thinking, hey, I want to be part of this, I want to help build a better world, don't let that feeling fade away. Take action. Get involved in your community. Support organizations that are doing good work. Learn more about the issues that matter to you. And speak up. Use your voice.
Yeah, creating a better world, it's not some impossible dream. It's something we can do together, step by step, choice by choice.
This has been such an amazing deep dive. I feel like we've explored so many ideas from ancient wisdom to modern solutions, and it's given me a lot of hope, honestly.
Me too.
It shows that a more just, sustainable, fulfilling future, it is possible, but we got to work for it. We got to be active, engaged citizens.
I would totally agree.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of rethinking democracy, and keep questioning, keep learning, keep taking action to build the world you want to see.
It's been a pleasure.